Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this Lacey City Council meeting to order on October 20th. If you can rise, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We do have a published agenda and consent agenda items in front of us.
Move to approve the agenda as published.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed?
Aye.
Then that motion carries unanimously. We have approved the agenda and consent agenda for today. And first up, under public recognitions and presentations, is the Lacey Youth Council report. You can go to the podium right there and give the report. Good to see you, Mayor.
Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and members of the City Council. My name is Justin Begley, and I'm currently serving as the Youth Mayor for the Lacey Youth Council. I currently attend Timberline High School as a senior. Over this past month, Timberline had its homecoming dance where Timberline sold over 1,000 tickets. I would like to thank and shout out the members of the senior class office for their hard work and dedication in putting together this amazing event. Timberline's ASB and leadership class is now working on their new Veterans Day Assembly scheduled for early November. As many of you already know, earlier this week, there was a threat of violence made against Timberline High School by an unknown person. I'd like to read a quote by Jose Rizal that reads, the youth is the hope for our future, end quote. This threat was a threat aimed at our youth and therefore a threat made against our future. School should be a safe place for all, and teachers and students should not have to fear any sort of violence while at school. I'd like to thank the Lacey Police Department and Timberline Administration for their swift action against these threats. The Youth Council is currently working on a project that will spread awareness of how things operate within our community. This project will be a video series where members of the Youth Council explains topics like what types of city governments are there, city manager, mayor, council, and which one does Lacey have? This would give members of our community and youth in our community better insight in how Lacey operates. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mayor.
Hi, my name is Ayana Young. I'm from North Thurston High School, and I'm a junior this year. Some upcoming events at our high school. We just had our homecoming dance, which was pretty well organized, and it was a really fun night. And then things that we're doing on the City Youth Council, we just started our video project and going over the timeline for that and having a subcommittee for that, which we are excited to work on. And yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm Keegan Bolt. I'm a senior at River Ridge, and you've heard it 2 times already, but homecoming dance, yeah. And then, of course, the air quality outside has canceled a lot of outside events, which has not been the best. But today we were reminded of an unfortunate trend for River Ridge because we had a partial lockdown due to some vague nearby police activity. And it's been an unfortunate marker, standard for River Ridge. Last year we had constant threats of violence or activities which just interrupted our education. And one thing which over all these events was poor communication from administration. And since then, it's become a major problem that even between staff and the administration, it's difficult to get information about what's going on and why, and it definitely hurts trust and how well represented we feel. So that's one of my main concerns currently about our school. That's making me kind of sad and concerned. And on the council, we've been working on a project to outreach to schools, particularly like ASB officers, so like elected leadership, to represent schools and those concerns, like the concerns I was just talking about, so we can get a better insight of what problems there are and how to fix them. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, go Rams. And I also want to say, I know the issues you guys have been having at River Ridge has just been very unsettling. But if there's anything we can do to continue to help support you, we will. And keep up the good work. You guys are doing an amazing job. We're really looking forward to the video series that you have, and it's going to explain a lot about our local government. And so we're definitely looking forward to that. But keep up the good work. We're proud of you and everything you're doing, and we're here to support you as much as we can. With that, next on our agenda is a public comment. We didn't have anyone sign up before today's meeting, but we did have one person sign up today, Larry Blanton. If you could please approach the podium, introduce yourself, and keep your comments about 3 minutes.
Sure. Good evening, members of the City Council. My name is Larry Blanton. I'm new to the Lacey area. And Mayor Ryder, I would like to thank you for your letter to the CACC opposing the airport. I've been following that issue. But my comments are very brief here, and I hope the City Council will make crime reduction a top priority. Incidents of residential burglary, burglary from motor vehicle, especially catalytic converters, and organized shoplifting rings are all too common in the local news feed. Criminals need to be arrested, charged, and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That's one of the things that we have definitely seen a rise of recently. And I want you to know that the City Council is very supportive of our police. You're right here, very shortly, you're going to hear our budget. And I think if you want to hear the values of a city, let's look at their budget. And this budget is in complete support of our police station. Matter of fact, we're trying to build a new police station right here to support our community. So you'll hear, if you want to stick around, you'll hear real shortly about our budget presentation. But thank you for your comments today. With that, we do need just a couple minutes for our city manager to prepare for our budget presentation. So if we could come back at like 3 minutes? It's like 3 minutes. We'll give him some time to get ready. So I'm going to close this meeting for like 3 minutes to allow the city manager to prepare for our budget presentation. Scott Spence to talk about our 2023 budget.
Thank you, Mayor. Honorable Mayor and City Council, it's my pleasure to talk about the 2023 budget process. I'm happy to present to you a balanced budget. As you know, Lacey is a very dynamic and growing city, and I think the budget this year reinforces council priorities. It makes substantial investments in our public infrastructure, and it also adds capacity to our workforce. Tonight's presentation is going to be broken up to 6 parts, and also touch upon the economy, since as a Lacey, Washington city, we do depend upon sales tax to sustain historical levels. So with that, I only have about 120 slides, which I know you are very excited to go through. Yes. So I will try to make this at least engaging, if not entertaining. All right, total budget. So this year's total budget for 2023 is just about $179 million. This total budget is balanced and obviously represents our best expectations for the near future. In comparison, the 2022 amended budget is about $16.9 million more. So this is a decrease. And we'll highlight some of those changes as I go through this presentation. So as I talked about the city of Lacey, we actually have 29 funds to track all of the dollars that we receive as a municipality. I think it's important to convey the importance of how we track the dollars so we provide confidence to the community. But sometimes the budget is better explained when we look at the sort of the broader umbrella funds, which is the general fund, the capital projects, special revenue, geo debt, enterprise, which are also our utility funds, and then our internal service funds. So what changes occurred from this year, from the previous year? So just kind of high level, the general fund is about 34% of the total budget. The general fund would typically show an increase when we add personnel, but we did some significant capital projects last year. We bought land for a future police station. We also bought more land for the Long Lake Park acquisition. We've done some rack improvements and some other things that actually exceed the amount of what we're going to add in personnel. So that's why you're seeing a decrease in the general fund. For capital projects, that's about 7.4% less than it was last year, or I'm sorry, 6.9%. And this reduction is primarily due to decreased spending within the building fund. We did complete some major projects last year. Think of the museum site where we actually took down a building and actually made it ready for development for the future museum. We also spent money on a facility condition assessment so we know what our needs are for the future. In terms of special revenue, that is up actually almost 50%. So special revenue does consist of 2 funds. One is the Hicks Lake Management District, and the other is our lodging tax fund. So the reason the increase is the fact that we're actually seeing better revenues in our hotel motel tax. So we're actually seeing more activity similar to what we would have seen in pre-COVID levels. For just comparison purposes, in 2022, the lodging tax fund was about $580,000. This year it totals about $887,000. So that explains that. In terms of debt service, we are lower. You may recall that we satisfied one of our general obligation bonds, which was the fire station as well as the fire equipment. And so that's why you're seeing a decrease in there. I think it's important to show that our debt is one of the smallest portions of our total budget. Utilities is our biggest portion of the total budget at almost 50%. And although we have increased spending on maintenance operations, we do have less spending in the capital area for 2023, about $9 million less. And then our internal service funds, which are made up of our equipment rental, so think fleet maintenance. And then we also have information services, so our tech. We continue to buy electric vehicles to convert and get away from internal combustion engines and try to meet the state mandate of 2035 to convert our entire fleet to EV or zero emissions. So as I mentioned before, the largest source of revenue, you hear this a couple times tonight, is sales tax at about 26%. Much of what we do depends on a strong, robust economy, but I will tell you the economic outlook is mixed. I want to just highlight a couple slides why that is so. So unemployment, this is a positive. So we are seeing near historical lows for unemployment. Actually, even prior to the pandemic, we're at 3.5% unemployment, which is a very positive sign. In September, we created as a country 263,000 jobs. So again, that is something to be, I guess, positive or at least confident that things are looking up. However, we're also seeing a sort of a missing workforce too. About 500,000 people that are 55 and older have left the workforce. And we've also talked about some of our challenges here at the City of Lacey, where we're about 10% vacancy rate within our total FTE. So it is challenging to find employees in this environment. Another positive is that you're seeing hotel occupancy rates actually go up, actually close to 60%. So that is another positive sign that we're starting to recover from pre-COVID, and you're seeing the leisure economy start to rebound from really 3 years of no activity at all. Another positive sign in that same arena is travel. So this is information from TSA. This is your daily passenger data, and we're about where we were before the pandemic in March of 2020. So you're starting to see more positive activity in the airports too. And ironically, we're talking about an airport, which kind of seems appropriate given the level of activity. But inflation is obviously a major concern. You saw this graph last year. It is substantially concerning about the amount of inflation that we've actually experienced. In no month in this year did we see less than 7.5% inflation for 2022. Inflation peaked at 9.1. We have not seen inflation that high since 1981, to provide perspective. So that's a 40-year high in terms of inflation, and as I think you've heard in the news, the Fed wants to increase the benchmark rates, and they plan to do that at least to either 4.25% or 4.5% before the end of the year. So we expect the inflation environment to be a little bit cloudy in the coming months. But then the stock market. The stock market has actually rebounded from pre-COVID. There's a little bit of stuff going on in the market in terms of being jittery, but the things that people are concerned about is obviously inflation, the energy markets, the war in Ukraine, and now there's about 63% of all economists believe we'll be in a recession in the next 12 months. However, the stock market has not completely reflected that yet. From a local perspective, I think we do have some bright paths ahead of us. This is probably some of the most diverse and robust activity. Council had a very robust overview of the development activity. I'm not going to go through all those slides, so that's not part of the 120 slide set. But I do want to just highlight some projects for the public that I think may be of interest. So one is the old Sears building. We don't like to see vacant buildings within the City of Lacey. That is going to have an at-home store, and you can see the elevations right there. And they're also going to add about 8,000 square feet to the footprint. So that'll be, now you actually have full occupancy at South Sound Center. A new hotel is being planned in Northeast Lacey behind the Providence outpatient building, just north of Britton Parkway and Marvin Road. So it's a 136-room hotel that is being planned. That will be helpful for the area. Council was very deliberate and strategic when they wanted to provide more market rate housing in the Midtown area, and that looks very similar to the drawings that you used to see a year ago. That is now being leased. So you have 151 units now available to the public. So that is good news for the Midtown, and it sort of speaks to all the planning that we did in that arena. Pickleball, if you don't know, is the state sport for Washington, and kind of interesting that the 23 Kitchens project is going to build a mixed-use project with 350 units, a restaurant, and 5 pickleball courts. So that is going to be very interesting, so you can get a burger, play some pickleball, or maybe go home, however you do it. Kind of an interesting development proposal. And then Olympia Orthopedics is actually planning to build an 86,000 square foot medical facility off of Britton Parkway, very close to Providence and the hotel. And that's in the planning process right now. So that is a fairly large development to happen in Northeast Lacey. So from an economic standpoint, things are actually very active within the local economy. And then we talked about this too. It used to be in the past that single family was kind of our major indicator of growth, and that has now been overtaken by multifamily. So multifamily has been the predominant housing type that's been built in the last really 5 years. And even in the pipeline, there's about 1,400 more units that are projected to be in the future. So that is a large sort of development pipeline that we're seeing in the future. And let's talk about council's work plan. So council did a lot of work this year to identify their priorities. I think it's important to talk about how the work plan relates to the budget. So council was very deliberate and mapped out really from 2022 to 2024 in their 8 vision areas such as safe community, a vibrant diverse economy, or safe and secure community, environmental stewardship, are some of those 8. And then you're very deliberate to put programs and initiatives under each one of those. That was basically your priorities in the coming years. So we'll try to highlight that as you go through the budget. Look for these symbols, and those will reaffirm the fact that the budget reflects the priorities that council have articulated in the work plan. How are we doing so far? So far, so good. Okay. So the general fund. As you know, the general fund is probably the most understandable from the Lacey community member in terms of that's where your Lacey property tax go, your sales tax go. It pays for police, it pays for parks, it pays for your road system. And so when we talk about the general fund, most people think in terms of the Lacey budget as a general fund. So for this year, the general fund is $60 million, almost $61 million out of the total budget. And you can see it broken out there in terms of the larger budget. This is a breakdown of the general fund. 61% of the revenue that pays for all the services in the general fund is brought in by taxes. So as you see on the chart to the right, you have sales, property, utility, and other. And just sales and property tax alone make about 40% of the revenue source for the general fund to pay for all the things that we do in the city of Lacey. In terms of sales tax history, now this is budgeted, this is not necessarily actual, but I think it's important to point out in 2020, we thought that with COVID, we would have no sales tax activity. I think it's just an important chart to remind what we were dealing with back in 2020. And then look at about where we're at today when we are projecting $15.8 million in sales tax. That is an historic high for the city of Lacey. As you know, we've had tremendous growth over the years. We've always had to try to discern this is ongoing revenue or this is one-time revenue. We think the $15 to $16 million mark is closer to ongoing revenue to sustain services. So that is what is in the budget for this year. So when we talk about property tax revenue, we are also at $8.49 million. This is obviously a number of things that goes into property taxes, such as our 1% levy rate, but we also can add in annexation, new construction, and also the refund levy. The biggest news, I think, when you talk about property taxes, we grew almost 34% in assessed value. That is probably the largest single year in terms of difference that we have ever seen. This is a reflection, a little bit of annexation, but it really is just the housing value and property values that have occurred in Thurston County. But that is significant. The one benefit is that is going to have a direct result on the levy rate. So 6.7. So last year when we talked about 88 cents per thousand, that was at that time the historic low. We've now beat the last year's historic low with 0.67 per thousand for a levy rate. So that is a dramatic reduction. I know there were some predictions last year and what that may be depending on what growth was, but that is very interesting to see how our rate has fallen. I will point out in 2013, that's when you start looking at the recession. That's when property values went down, and there's that inverse relationship, and this chart better explains that. Anytime your assessed valuation goes down, your levy rate is going to go up. So that is the inverse relationship between the rate and the assessed value of the community. So this is my favorite slide because we always talk about property taxes, and it seems to be the most misunderstood of our taxing sources. So this is a very simplified example. It doesn't relate to the numbers we have in the budget, but I think it's good to walk through. So when we talk about the city of Lacey, you first have to look at what is the assessed valuation of a city. In this example, we're using $8 billion. So by law, the city of Lacey can increase its property tax limitation or regular levy by 1%. So how that works is, let's say we had a levy rate last year of $7.5 million. By law, we can increase that by 1%, which would be $75,000. Then that would be added to the new levy for the coming year. So again, this is just a math formula. People get concerned like we somehow set the rate. We don't know the rate until we actually figure out what the prior levy is. We add our 1% and some other additional issues, and then we need to also look at what is the assessed valuation, because that amount, that fixed amount, gets spread over the community. So you take that regular levy rate that's distributed uniformly over property owners with a per thousand assessed value basis. Then you do the formula. So in this formula, we have a $7,575,000 levy rate, or levy, excuse me, and you have an $8 million or $8 billion assessed value. Divide that by 1,000, You go to the calculation on the bottom, and then you basically divide that, and you come with your levy rate, which is going to be basically 94 or 95 cents per thousand. That's essentially how taxes are calculated. I know we get wrapped up and say, well, this is the rate, we impose the rate, but it's actually a formula. We don't know the rate until we actually know what the assessed valuation is and until we do our 1% calculation. So there's your primer on property tax. So when we talk about the general fund, this is the major general fund revenue sources. So we mentioned sales tax, we have service fees. Service fees are those things that offset direct costs. So this would include development fees, about $2 million for this year. We also have about $900,000 within our park system. And then we also have internal charges from Public Works that we do charge to the enterprise funds, which is calculate about $6.5 million. Utility tax, that's 6% that you see on like your cell phone bill. And others, that raises almost $9 million. Then we have shared or property tax, we talked about that. You have B&O tax, state shared revenue, which comes from fuel, liquor, and criminal justice tax, as well as marijuana revenues. That's about 1.78. We also have an indirect charge, and this is the charge that the general fund charges utilities for the management of those utilities. And then other is a combination of things of our beginning fund balance, also interest earnings, and a multitude of funds that come up to about 10.22 that bring up our general fund revenue. So then when you look at our major expenses, you can say Scott Ager is the most expensive department within the city of Lacey. He is needy. So, and the reason that is because he does have the most employees, but that's about a $16.4 million annual cost. That's followed by police. We have capital transfers, and you can see the rest. I will point out that we've been increasing our investment in social services, and that's going to be at 1.14 in 2023. So I'd like to break down what things cost, because I think at some point we lose context when we start talking about millions of dollars, and what does it cost to actually provide service to the public. And I always think of sort of the 3 Ps. You think of parks, you think of pavement, and you think of police. So let's start off with parks. So parks, just in general, that department is a $2.6 million investment. And so that provides all the offerings of classes, the programs, fitnesses, day trips, and sports. And we have about 1,100 participants per year, or I'm sorry, over 50,000 participants per year, plus the 15 community events that we do on an annual basis. Then when we talk about aquatics, we do a great job of teaching people how to swim. So we have about 2,500 participants in the pools that we manage, including open swim if you want to use the pools, which are at River Ridge, Timberline, and also North Thurston. And then you talk about some of our greatest parks that we have in the city of Lacey. So Regional Athletic Complex. So as we talk about, that is booked more than 50 times out of the year. It's a great sports complex for soccer and softball and baseball, but it also serves as a general park for the public, actually a regional park. And then we look at Rainier Vista, which is another great park off of 45th Avenue. That's about a $500,000 investment a year, and that's where we host our 3rd of July event. And then when you talk about our remaining 1,000 acres of parks, you're looking at about a $1.9 million just to maintain really one of the best things that we get compliments all the time, which is our park system. So that is really what it costs to maintain our park system and our Parks and Recs department. $6.9 million bucks. So let's talk about pavement or streets. So we do a lot in the streets department. We have over 5,000 streetlights. We have over 383 lane miles, 213 miles of sidewalks, and over 8,000 street signs that we have to maintain. The department is about $1.6 million to take care of some of those items. That's just the base employees that we have. When we talk about roadside and roadway maintenance, that costs about $1.2 million to do what we talk about. I mentioned the street lighting. That costs us about $840,000 on an annual basis. Look at the signs and markings. That seems like a pretty good value for 8,000 signs that we have to maintain. And then sidewalks is about $330,000. And so all told, that's about $4.5 million. And not to be outdone, we spend about $100,000 on snow removal each year. So, unless it doesn't snow. And then we talk about public safety. So as you're seeing that council priority, obviously we want a safe and secure community. And this is how we do it. So just from a police department standpoint, it's about $15.4 million. Patrol alone is over $9 million. When you talk about prosecution, you're talking about the indigent defense to basically, if someone is a victim of crime and they can't pay for an attorney. We have court services that are paid through the county. And then ultimately, if you have to be incarcerated, it costs us about $724,000 to put someone in jail. And so that's about a $17.1 million investment. Now, we always talk about the cost of sales tax and property taxes. This is a good reminder. If we took all of the sales tax, we'd also need about 16+% of our property tax just to pay for this one service in the city. So that provides a good overview of just what things cost within the city. So here's another breakdown as we talk about our most important asset, which is our employees. The majority of our general fund is made up of salaries and benefits, about 67%. And let's talk about really general fund workforce additions. So we are going to be adding 8 new employees for the 2023 budget. We talked about this at the budget workshop. We're going to be adding 2 lieutenants. This is part of a succession plan in terms of how we're going to manage and improve our span and control and oversight of the police department. We're also going to be adding a detective to basically assist in just the additional demand that we're seeing in that area. We're also going to be adding a social service coordinator. As you know, homelessness has been a priority issue for this Lacey community, really going back 10 to 15 years, and it's been a growing issue. As you know, we're an active partner in the Regional Housing Council, and this is just one of those areas that we have 3, if not 4 different people working on it, and it's just time that we need a dedicated resource to that priority. As the most diverse community in Thurston County, our organization would benefit from a DEI coordinator. I think this signals our commitment to inclusion and also aligns with our organizational values of diversity, so that will also be included in the 23 budget. And we talk about coordinated planning. As you know, we do have priorities in our climate action plan. We're also working on a regional framework with our partners to do climate initiatives. And again, this is just another position that we have at least 3, if not 4 people trying to cover that. This would give us a dedicated resource to actually monitor that program. We also have additional dollars for our own programs that we'd like to have managed directly, and that will help that process. Parks Comprehensive Planner and Coordinator position is sorely needed within the city of Lacey. If you think of the future projects that we just have kind of in the pipeline, we have a future museum. We have more phases of the Great Cuyo Park. We have a RAC Phase 3 future phase at some point in the future. We just acquired the Long Lake Park, and we need to do some master planning of that. And just even small park improvements need that additional resource to make sure they're done correctly and appropriately. And then a housing coordinator is the final position that we're including in the budget. So again, this is to provide capacity in the community economic development department. We have an award-winning ADU program. This is a position that can help promote and advocate for that. We also have affordable housing initiatives that need to be worked on to also meet our comprehensive housing goals, as well as assist with permanent supportive housing projects. So again, that will be another resource. All told, these positions add about $1.13 million to the general fund budget. So when we look at our workforce, this is always just a good reminder. We have 321 FTEs if you add in the 8 employees that we're talking about. 81% of those employees are funded out of the general fund, and the remainder out of our utilities. This shows you really a timeline of how we've added employees. It's kind of interesting. It kind of sort of speaks a little bit to our growth, but during the Great Recession, we were essentially flat. We also actually dipped below our FT count in 2013 through almost until 2017. We did not recover the level of FTs that we had. And then we've sort of been on this path of growth in employees to try to keep up with just the population that we're trying to serve. And so for 2023, we'll have 321 FTEs. This chart tries to at least demonstrate, where we're at from a full-time employee per 1,000 benchmark. It's not necessarily scientific, but it does show sort of a trend in terms of, we're trying to keep up with growth. If you went back 2010, you can make an argument that we're not quite keeping up with growth. You could add more positions, but we also have to pay attention to affordability and sustainability of that workforce. And so when we talk about that sustainability, just for the benefits as well as the salaries of that workforce that we talked about, that's a $36 million bill. And so you can kind of see the growth that we've had just in the 3 last budgets that we're talking about. So again, we need to make sure that our budgets are sustainable, that we can actually meet the essential needs of the community, but there is a cost to provide the labor to do those essential services. So let's talk about some of the public investments that is coming out of the general fund. So one, obviously, we are going to continue the neighborhood grant program, about $60,000. We've had some discussion about expanding the program to non-formalized HOAs or neighborhoods that identify as a neighborhood. So that would be an expansion of the program. Obviously, we're supporting our veteran community. I think Lacey's been a leader in supporting our veterans. We have $230,000+ to do the Lacey Veteran Services Hub. Interestingly, last year we exceeded 8,000 client appointments. That's the largest amount we've had in a single year. So it just tells you the invaluable resource that we have actually created within the region. We have on track to do the Mayor's Gala in 2023. As you know, that was an event that was started at the 50th anniversary of the City of Lacey, and that is held every odd year. If you've been to Woodland Creek Community Park lately and walked the pedestrian bridge, we've been getting several complaints, and there's concern about maintenance, so we are going to replace that bridge. Back in the day, we were able to use drive maintenance vehicles over that bridge, but it's no longer sustainable, or there's concern structurally if that can actually sustain the weight of a car. And so we will replace that, plus also fix some of the embutments or the, shore up the embankments for that bridge. Do you have a question, Councilman Greenstein? Oh, okay, sorry. Climate Action Plan. We have another $200,000 for our climate initiative. So these are programs that we can either promote for weatherization, make sure that you're solar ready, and also for large appliance or appliance rebates as well as energy audits. Again, that's where the sustainability coordinator will actually help out with that project. One thing that we talk about, our police department does face a myriad of challenges when they're out in the community, and they're expected to make split decisions under very stressful situations. And I think we owe it to our officers as well as our community to ensure that we have all the potential training tools available to our officers. So this is a virtual trainer. What this does is it provides a multitude of real life scenarios, and then you're able to guide officers in a safe environment to actually make mistakes and try to successfully reduce conflict with the least amount of force. And so this is in the budget, and I think it will be a great tool for the Lacey Police Department. So speaking of the police department, I know we've had some discussion about this investment here in the last couple weeks, and there's been some input from the public. But just very high level, let's talk about the police department. It's no longer meeting the needs of the community. It's pushing 40 years. The picture on the very far left is our very first police department, which is now the current museum. The one in the middle is our current police department, which was built in 1985 for a population of 15,000 when we had about 15 commissioned officers. And today we're essentially operating out of that same footprint and serving a community very close to 60,000 with 63 commissioned officers. We've done some smart things. We have already secured property thanks to St. Martin's Abbey, which will be adjacent to the City Hall campus. And so that is already in play. But now the question is, how do we essentially build a police station for the community? And I'm just going to propose two options for consideration for council, because at some point this will be an impact to the budget. So when we discussed this at the budget workshop, you could do a councilmatic approach. And I wouldn't get too caught up in the numbers, but just in general, the philosophy would be, could you take existing reserves, potential ARPA money, and then also REIT, or real estate excise tax, for a combination of about roughly $25 million. That'd pay for about 2/3, or more than 2/3, 62% of the cost of the police station. And then what you do, you take the rest, or the remainder of that $15 million, and you would authorize a councilmatic bond, and then you'd pay for that bond, which would be about $1.42 million in annual payments if you assumed a 7% interest rate for 20 years, and pay for that of future revenues, essentially other future REIT dollars coming into. The reason that would be an attractive alternative is, one, is I just showed you the inflationary chart. We are fighting inflation. Time is really not on our side. If you do this approach, you can finish the early schematic design and go right into full design. And it also speaks to the fact that if you have dollars to invest in a police station, you could avoid having to tax the Lacey community. So from that perspective, that is an attractive option. The other alternative would be to go to a vote for $40 million. And in that case, you'd be looking at a general obligation bond about $3.8 million. And the impact to the average household, if you're using $500,000, would be about $150. In that case, we do have to consider the fact that potentially you'd have to wait to a special election, which would be either in February or April. So there'd be a time delay in terms of could you continue to design the building, or you wait to the general fund, which would be longer in 2023. And again, you would be putting a tax on the public when in fact we do have revenues for consideration. So I think the high-level discussion for council is really what is the best option you think is best for the community. So you either have option one, which is a councilmatic approach, or you have an option two where you have a position where you're going to the voters and issuing general obligation bonds. Yeah.
Is it fair to say that because of the debt service, this is actually a more expensive option in the long run?
Yeah, it would be to the public, absolutely.
Because
of
we would have to
40 million over
pay
20
that.
years. Yeah, correct. In terms of just burden on, but you're shifting the burden on the community versus the city finances, if that makes sense. So the community is end up paying the debt on that with their property taxes versus you already have revenues that you're utilizing, which you would not put taxes on to the public. And you have a shorter present value that you're actually using of $50 million versus $40 million.
Right.
Yeah.
Councilmember.
Another quick question on that. If we went with option one, how soon could we start moving?
Well, I think as soon as we get schematic design done, which I think is November, I'm looking at Chief here. That is correct. Okay. Then I think you could provide a green light and you go into full design, so you would have no interruption or gap.
Okay.
Then you would have a better idea what the full cost is going to be, and then it would just be a matter, you have enough dollars now in that $25 million that you can actually do substantial work and give yourself time to prepare for a councilmatic bond. Yeah.
If we committed only part of the ARPA dollars to that, let's say 3.5 mil, do you know how that would work out in terms of impact, and could we find a happy medium there?
Yeah, I think, and this is where we go back to the buckets. I think we need to be realistic in the fact that the police station is a multi-year project. And so at some point, if you wanted to reduce that bucket, say by 3.5, we could probably figure out another way to get another 3.5 to replace that if that's the decision of council. So again, I think in terms of community, I think we have capacity to do both projects if we're talking about a permit supportive project.
Yeah, so obviously this is something that is new information that we've just recently had. I've spoken to the city manager about this and tried to talk about what is a possible path forward. I think we have identified a possible $3.5 million that we could put towards the permanent supportive housing project that you're talking about and still put all these ARPA dollars towards this project. The problem is when you split the ARPA dollars on a project that's outside the city, it's that where we're not the direct person doing it, it becomes a nightmare to try to track that for the federal government ARPA dollars. So we shouldn't split that. So, but I do think we have a path forward for another $3.5 million where we could put towards that project. We're trying to make the numbers work. We're still open to that, and we hope we can have a path forward there.
Okay. So capital projects, that is the other area of the total budget. So $20 million for our program for 2023, and we'll go through some of those highlights. So the RAC parking lot, this is my one disclaimer. This is technically a carryover project. Troy's making me say this disclaimer, but it's actually going to happen in 2023. Where's Troy? Is he looking at me? Okay. All right. So again, parking lot, if you've ever been there, it's sorely needed, 327 parking stalls. People park there now. This would have formalized lighting. It is a project that has been
Since 2015.
wanted to do in 2022, but we had some issues with staffing to get it done.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for like 10 years.
I know. Only the project we talk about a lot are worth doing. So we also, as part of that project, that does trigger frontage improvements. So as part of that project, we will be doing frontage improvements from Marvin Road to Stillicum, or really from Marvin Road intersection to the entrance of the RAC. That's going to be about $610,000. So you'll see sidewalks out there, street lighting, and landscaping, as well as stormwater collection. The LED, so we did look, this is our 7th year of the LED program. So pretty amazing. We mentioned the fact that we had 5,000 streetlights, and we're in our 7th year. We projected even back in 2015, 2016, that once this project is complete, we hope to save about $500,000 in energy savings by going from the high-pressured sodium to LEDs. So this is a great project. I will give some credit to Scott Ager. Some cities just do this all at once. You just do the hard capital and you do it all at once, but then in 15 years, you're going to have to do them all once again. So this allows us on a 10-year basis to deal with it as they become obsolete. So thank you, Scott. Okay. Midtown Access, we've talked about this roundabout. This would be a critical connection between the St. Martin's campus and Midtown. This is a little bit breaking news, but I will mention the fact that we are moving very close, or a consensus with agreement with St. Martin's, Abbey, as well as MGR. I'd like to thank Rick's work on that one. But this could really be a significant entrance feature, and I can't stress enough, a more safe crossing for students trying to get to Midtown. As you know, unfortunately, sometimes they try to cross College Street without a formalized pathway. And then the Transportation Benefit District. Voters were supportive of the city's maintenance of their street system, which is great. We have $7.5 million invested for the 2023 overlay project. Part of the reason it's so high this year, there are some projects we could not do last year. So that delayed some of the overlay programs that we had planned. So that is a very big investment. I think council should be proud of the fact that we have a road rating of, or not road rating, 97.2% of our roads are either rated good or very good. We do a great job of maintaining our public infrastructure. Citywide signal ITS detection system. So let me tell you what it isn't. It is not a red light camera program. A lot of people think those cameras are taking tickets. It's to activate a signal if you have a long queue line. So we have 10 intersections that we plan to replace with better technology. I was talking to Scott earlier today. Sometimes a spider web will cross the lens and actually not make the camera work better. So we, I don't know if they're putting windshield wipers or something like that on there, but they're actually going to improve the technology. So the Greg Cuyo Park, and again, another disclaimer, this is technically in the 2022 budget, but it's going to be constructed in 2023. As you know, this is a council priority. This is one of our largest parks, and we're actually going to do phase 1A. So some of the things that you're going to see is the access to a picnic shelter, playground equipment, multiple trails. We think this is going to be a regional draw for our area. We're very excited about it. And an 18-hole disc golf course. And if no one's excited about disc golf, I want to share this with you. If you have not seen this, just take this in. And that didn't work. John, help me here.
He's a ways back, and he's going to have to still make the dog leg. He's got a lot of space out there to the left. We'll see how aggressive of an angle he puts on this, or if he keeps it more neutral and just lets the disc drag over.
He's using that envy again, so it's a putter.
I think you did.
Ladies and gentlemen, that doesn't stand
I think you get the picture, but it's amazing the amount of excitement and the popularity of the sport. So I thought I'd just share that because we talk about disc golf all the time, and we ran across that, so I thought it'd be worth sharing. So greatest shot in disc golf history. So let's talk about special revenue.
Scott,
yeah.
I support disc golf, but I will say that it's not pickleball.
Okay, fair enough. All right, let's talk about special revenue. As we mentioned before, those are two funds made up of lodging tax and also the Hicks Lake Management District. So the first fund of the special revenue is the Hicks Lake Management District, about just $48,000. And you may recall property owners petitioned council because they wanted to improve the water quality of Hicks Lake, and you kind of see some of the aquatic vegetation that is degrading the water quality. This is not a tax on the entire community. This is a tax on the people that benefit or are adjacent to the lake. So you can see if you're a property owner and just land only, you pay $135 and a special assessment on your property tax. If you have a home, it's a little higher, and if you have special access to the lake, then you pay $22.50. All told, assessments raise about $43,000 to continue to manage the plan that they've adopted. So then we talk about lodging tax. As you know, we have 8 hotels within the city of Lacey. We charge a 4% rate on rooms. So just quick math, if you had a one night at a hotel for $100, the city would receive $4 for that. This is a history of the lodging tax that we've had since 2016. I'll just point out in 2020, that's when obviously sort of things fell off the earth with COVID. But now, if you look at the revenue, we are now matching pre-COVID levels, even in the city of Lacey. So in 2019, we had just under 500,000. In 2023, we think we're going to have 520 of current ongoing revenue from our hotels. The orange is reserves that we are utilizing to meet other demands of the applications that were submitted. So for 2023, we had 22 applications that were received by 18 organizations that totaled just under $900,000. New to, I will say, the lodging tax funding is Deschutes Rugby, a Kris Kringle Market Festival, Olympic Soccer Foundation, and also Juneteenth celebration. You may recall there was a capital request from the Washington Center, and the Lodging Tax Committee recommended spending $250,000 out of reserves to support that request. So the budget has all those items included in it, and we still have some reserves left over after that investment. So enterprise funds. So as I mentioned before, enterprise funds are the utility funds. They do make up 50% of the total budget. It's the largest portion of the budget. Hard not to talk about water, and we'll go into wastewater too, but we are projecting just within the capital improvements a $125 million investment within water infrastructure. That is a significant investment over the next 6 years. And that is why when we talk about rates to support the capital investment as well as the operations and maintenance, we are recommending a 5.25%. Now we're just asking for a single year increase for this year, but we are projecting out that at some point if you look at 24 through 2027, the consultant is recommending similar rate increases for those subsequent years to raise sufficient capital for that. Very similar story in wastewater. We have a $44 million capital improvement investment, and then we need a rate structure that will support that capital investment as long as the M&O, as well as the M&O. So we're looking at 9.5% increase. If you look down on that chart, that equates to about a $76.77 in terms of a monthly charge. And again, that also extends out till 2027. This is a look of 2022 and 2023 when we look at our M&O, our capital, and debt. I will point out in water, the reason we had a larger M&O than the 2023 budget, we've had failing water meters that we've been dealing with in our water system, and we spent about $800,000 to buy enough inventory so we had enough. Plus, we were trying to overcome some supply chain issues, so we made that investment. So that's why that number goes down year over year. And then even though we're spending a lot of money still from a capital investment standpoint, it's not as large as it was in 2022 in water or wastewater. So that gives you the difference between the 3 different utilities. So everyone wants to know, what does that look like in terms of rates? We typically use this chart just to show how we compare to our neighbors. I'll be quick to point out, though, we have very different systems. We have wells. Olympia has basically a water source that's not dependent on wells. Tumwater is a different system, different ages system. But for the 2023 proposed budget, we're looking at basically $127.84 if you combine the water, wastewater, lot, and stormwater. A big portion of that does go to lot, of that 49 cents. About 2/3 of that will go to lot as a pass-through. One thing people don't appreciate, but it's always good to point out again, when you start thinking about what a city does, 2.7 billion gallons of water produced annually and delivered to basically our residents, that is a phenomenal amount. We have 20 wells that we have to maintain, 400 miles of water mains that we have to maintain. Again, on the sewer side, 1.5 billion gallons of sewer that we collect. And so when you talk about essential services, I know we think about public safety, but you really cannot get more essential when you're talking about water and sewer. And even on the stormwater side, 5,200 catch basins. As much as it rains here, that is a critical facility that we have, and over 100 miles of stormwater pipe. So that is why you see the amount of investment in our utilities. So let's talk about some of those utility improvements that we're talking about for 2023. So we started this project this year, but we still have more work to do. This is the Terry Cargill Reservoir. This is to help with pressure zones. This will be a 1.25 million gallon reservoir. And that does look like a golf tee, but that is the first design that we've ever done. It's the most efficient design that we can come up with to what we need to accomplish. All told, when this project is done, this is a $15 million project. So you start to understand maybe the scale and scope of those projects that we're doing. Another project that we're looking at is Lift Station 19. We call it rehabilitation, but it's actually a removal or replacement of an existing lift station. Our current lift station is 32 years old. It's on Willamette Drive in Northeast Lacey. This project will replace the existing lift station, and we'll put in our standard submersible pump, our valve vault, our permanent on-site generator, and security fencing, and that will be a $2.8 million project for 2023. We also have the lift station number 3 replacement. This is actually our oldest lift station at over 50 years. You may recall we did our phase, which was our design and site prep. We're now starting construction on that. We have $1 million to start the construction. This project will be more than that once it's finally done. We're also doing the golf club water main project. So this water main really goes north of 14th and south of 21st. We are replacing asbestos cement pipe. It's in poor condition. We have about 2,500 linear feet of pipe that we need to replace. And we're also having an additional scope that we're going to add to this. We're going to replace another 1,300 linear feet of water main from Golf Club to Slater Kinney. In conjunction with that project, we're also doing wastewater improvements, so you don't want to tear up a road twice. So that makes sense. So that's a $3.5 million project. So Slater Kinney sewer main is at maximum capacity, and we're going to divert some of the lift station outfall to Golf Club, which is the most effective cost solution for that. And this project includes 2,000 linear feet of pipe as well as 4,000 linear upgrading of pipe that's in our existing gravity main. So that will be a significant project for 2023. Probably understand that this is sort of basic chemistry, but you want to get close to 7 as possible when you talk about your water, when it goes into domestic pipes. Sometimes if it's too acidic or it's too much base, then you start to have some caustic issues with the soldering within pipes, and it's not good if that enters into drinking water. And so working with the Department of Health, we have a couple projects that will actually help with our pH treatment to get it closer to neutral. So this will be in Madrona's 1, 2, and 3 wells, and that's a $750,000 project. And then we're also looking to buy property for a future Ruddle Road stormwater facility. There's untreated water coming off of 37th Avenue that potentially could enter Hicks Lake that we need to take care of. We also have an existing Ruddle Road stormwater facility that at peak times cannot handle all the rainflow that goes into that facility, and this will take care of that overflow. Okay, let's talk about debt. Debt's good in limited amounts. So for the debt service budget this year, it's just under $1.4 million. I think the council does need to take credit and take pride in the fact that we have a very low debt position. We have essentially less than $12 million of outstanding debt. We statutorily could actually extend ourselves to $684 million. I wouldn't suggest that, but statutorily you could do that. So again, this is, I think, a source of pride for the city of Lacey. If you look at our historical debt position, it goes from 2008 to 2021, we've done a very good job of managing our debt and not adding to that debt. If you look at our general obligation bonds that the voters have passed, those bonds, both of those will be paid off by 2026, but that shows you currently we have about a $700,000 annual payment, and the outstanding balance on that is about $1.7 million. Yeah. You know, I haven't looked at that, but I got to think that we have probably one of the lowest debt positions of any city. I don't know if, Troy, do you have any insight on that?
It's low, but exactly how low it's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you look at our total debt position, this would include not just voter-approved debt, but this would also include our debt and utilities, which is those revenue bonds, but also a councilmatic bond that we did with the RAC to expand Phase 2. And that, you see the totals there, but from an excess levy standpoint, we're adding about less than 5.5 cents per thousand to voters to pay those two remaining debt instruments. Utilities take care of the debt, which is up there by the 2013 revenue bonds. And then the PFD, the revenue that comes in for that is taking care of the limited term general obligation bonds. And now our internal service funds. So internal service funds, and I'll just kind of jump to it, but that's $6.8 million. Our internal service funds are our equipment rental fund and information services. So you have about 3.9 and 2.9 respectively. We have over 200 vehicles in our city fleet. So that is a large amount of vehicles, our rolling stock that we have to maintain with the shop and mechanics so we can perform our job. We have 750 plus devices. So think about that. Even council members have at least 2 devices. You know, you think of your phone, you think of your iPad. It's not uncommon for an employee to maybe have 3, if not 4 devices. And so that is a lot of technology to maintain and also pay for and replace. I think the big story in this fund is the fact that we, again, are trying to convert our fleet over to electric. So we have 12 vehicles that we are going to either do EV or zero emissions. So on the far right, if you look at, we're going to buy F-150s to replace Jeep Cherokees with Chevys, Ford Escape. We also are going to invest in a Ford E-Transit all-electric van. We get one of those. And then, believe it or not, we're going to be replacing our forklift, our mowers, and actually do an EV equivalent. So we will not be using basically fossil-based fuels to operate that equipment. So we're coming to the end of the presentation. This is sort of the value proposition. I cannot think of a service anywhere, either in the private sector, that you can get all the things that we do for citizens of Lacey for $361. Now, this is the tax that the city charges our residents. I'm not talking about the total tax bill, but that is a great deal. When you think of 24/7 police, you think of our 1,200 acres of parks property, you think of our road system, you think of what the Leadership Council provides, and all the amenities that the city of Lacey provides to its residents and community events. That is a great bargain, and it's something we should laud and celebrate. When we look at other values, I'll just point out cable. It's amazing how expensive cable is these days. So that is your average cable bill, and people, I don't know how much you can consume of $2,600 worth of cable, but when you compare that to our property tax bill, that seems like we're a better bargain. Used car payment, average cell bill. If you want to buy a brand new cell phone, it's over $1,000. So again, property taxes and what we provide as a city is a pretty good bargain. Now, when we talk about where the property taxes go, as I mentioned before, we're just a portion of that. We make up about 8% of your total tax bill. Your local schools and your state is the majority at 63% of that. And if you actually look over a couple of years, we've actually been trending down. So we actually used to be 9% of the tax burden. Now we're down to 8.2%. Again, schools and state are the majority of that tax impact to our property owners. Oh, do you have a question? Nope. Okay. Okay. So this is what Lacey property taxes are going to be compared to 2022 versus 2023. So last year, if you had a house that was valued at $374,000, let's call it $375,000, you would have paid essentially $358 a year for that. If we look at what we're doing now, if we talked about the assessed valuations increasing across the board, about 34% is the average. So we're using our $500,000 average home value and your regular levy as well as your excess levy, you're paying about $361 or $362 on an annual basis. That's just an under $4 increase from year to year. We've talked about this before, but this is a great tool for the community. If you ever go to the assessor's office or the treasurer's office of Thurston County, I encourage someone to enter their property address, inform themselves. An informed community is basically local government depends on an informed community. You can see the last 3 years of your taxes, where they go by basically district, and then what portion of your bill goes where. So It is a great tool and interactive tool for the public. And then just really finally, in terms of budget comparison, I think we always want to know what is the impact of this budget compared to last year. I will point out, because we paid off our fire debt last year, that's why city property taxes were basically less overall. But now that's been reset. But basically, this year's budget compared to last year's budget will go up basically $8.02 per month. So that provides you, again, all the city services, our utilities of water, wastewater, and stormwater. And so, obviously, we want public participation. We have one member. Thank you for showing up. There are more opportunities to comment on the budget. Obviously, November 3rd, we're going to be talking about our revenue sources, which includes property taxes. That's going to be followed on November 17th for a total budget overview, and there'll be opportunities to comment on both of those dates. We will also be talking another time about the proposed budget. This will be your final public opportunity to make comments on the budget. And then we have a scheduled council adoption on December 15th. As you know, this is available online. If people go to our website, they can see the entire document and actually look at the numbers. And so we encourage you to do that. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have about the budget. Sure, that'd be great.
Are there any other
I don't know about the
questions?
video, though. That may crash the website with the greatest golf shot ever, or disc golf. So does council have any questions about the 2023 budget?
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Can I just ask a foundational question? This is me using my I'm new prerogative.
Sure.
When you had the slide that explained the way that we get to our levy rate each year, where does the original levy rate come from? I understand that we can only take last year's and apply a 1%, and we do some math related to the increase in value. But where does the original levy rate come from last year?
So last year is built on like just like right now we have an $8 million levy rate. So that is your base, and then that's going to increase by 1%. So our original, I guess, levy was established
Back when we formed this
15
city.
years ago when we did 747, when they basically put a cap on that. And so we've been building off of that regular levy ever since then.
So it's anchored at that rate that existed 15 years ago, plus 1%, plus 1%.
Yeah,
since then.
statutorily before Initiative 747, you could actually increase property taxes up to 6%. And so once that initiative came through, it actually, I believe the initiative failed and the legislature made it into law. And then that's where it capped the 1% limitation on the city's established levy rate at that time. I'm sorry, or regular levy amount. Yeah.
It's pretty complicated because you have to take the debt of the city, right? And then you have to, if there's any other special things that are in there, and then you spread that across the assessed value of the entire city. And so we've been growing so much as a city that our assessed value grew 34%. And so we're spreading it among more of the taxpayers, which is why we're at a historic low 0.67 levy rate. And so, which I think is remarkable. I don't think there's another city out there that has a levy rate that low. So, but yeah, it got started a long time ago. As a city develops its budget, you sort of develop what that initial rate's going to be based on your assessed value, and it kind of goes from there.
Maybe I could provide even a better answer. So, yes.
It's complicated, and I know Scott was out there trying to do math and lost, like most people probably, but it's good. It was a good attempt.
My feelings have been hurt.
It's so complicated.
So I want you to notice in 2013 why that was about the time that we no longer provided service for
Fire
fire
district.
services. So we used to actually contract with Fire District 3. So we actually voluntarily gave up our property tax authority, which actually then reestablished a different levy amount that we could have actually charged to residents. We actually technically still have capacity in that levy that we could add as a one-time, which
We
is
actually did something that government never does. We actually reduced taxes.
Yeah.
For real, like reduced.
Yeah.
So when you think of a fire district charges $1.50 per thousand, we voluntarily gave up essentially that amount as a promise to the voters that you would not be paying for the same service twice.
Was that still considered a public safety tax?
Well, municipalities have the right to provide fire service, so.
So
it
that
was just-
specifically goes with fire, it's not an overall general public, does it fall under public safety? For example, could we take part of that levy and,
No, because when they annexed the city of Lacey,
Okay.
we lost that $1.50 capacity statutorily.
okay,
Yeah.
any other questions?
I had one.
Go ahead.
So when the consultant is considering how much we need to adjust for utilities, is he or she also taking into account the pipeline of the new projects that are coming online,
Yeah.
and all the new units that are coming available, and still considers that we need to bring that up?
So your consultants will be looking at the system-wide needs, that's the kind of maybe the first initial analysis, and then the question is who pays for it? So then you're looking at projected development, because if they're causing an impact and technically you have the ability to charge new development because they're causing growth in the system, so that should be paid by development, essentially. And then you have the base system that then the regular customers have to also maintain and pay for. And at some point, you grow, and then you're gonna have, say, if you have pressure issues, you have to replace outdated, say, equipment or wells or whatever that is, that's also factored in there. So you have a combination of growth, you have development, as well as just what the needs are of the system, and then you have a combination of factors how to pay that off.
It's not really a question, but more of a comment. I think at some point in the near future, we need to look at doing a multi-year. I mean, we're looking at it every year as far as the rate. We now have, and that made a lot of sense before we had the studies done. But now that it's done, I think we need to, at some point in the near future, look at a multi-year rate on the utilities rather than addressing it each year. Just throw that out there as a
I
comment.
mean, if I could be so bold, I mean, we know what the rates are supposed to be. If council wanted to have that discussion as we talk about the revenue sources, that's something council could do and make that a multi-year rate.
Yeah, I think it's worth looking at now because, when we were still in the process of having those studies done to determine it, made sense to do it 1 year at a time, but they're done. We know what the rate need is now.
Under what circumstances would we not follow the guidance from the consultant? Like, what would happen to cause us to depart from what they
yeah.
recommend?
Then we wouldn't do the capital projects that we have scheduled. So we have had this conversation about, do we do a multiple year rate or do we do it every year? I think there's been some unknown, reason why we didn't do it is because there's some unknown saying, are there going to be other funds that we can use to help pay that rate down? And I still think there are some other some opportunities out there to get some federal funding for some of our water stuff that we're looking at that may affect the rate too. And so I think as the budgets come out and the new federal funding comes out and we take a hard look at it, we can make a decision of where our rate's going to be long-term. The other thing is I've always haven't felt comfortable about committing a future council to a rate. And so I've always been a little concerned about that, but, we know what the rate.
Change it still.
We know what the rate should be, and I hope that future councils go by our capital facilities, projects, which determines mostly our rates, but.
I mean, I think you can still make an argument you should do one. I think it gets more critical too when you start doing
Bonds.
debt. Right, so you want some assurance to the bondholders you're actually going to satisfy the debt instrument that was issued.
I know I have a question. For the Hicks Lake Management District, it didn't look like it changed that much from last year to this year or till next year, yet we know there's 2 apartment complexes going. What's that going to do to that Hicks Lake Management District? How are those 2 properties going to pay for that?
So they would be treated as a landowner with a building, so they would be charged whatever that cost would be. I don't know if it's by a unit or not. I don't know if
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, it's by user-based.
Okay.
So the population and number of users would impact the rate.
So that's going to go way, way up then.
So you would raise rates based on that, correct?
Yeah, so there will be a redistribution of funds.
Jesus, was a lot of slides.
The Lake Management District had to determine their needs, and the assessment was based on that. So there will be a redistribution of those multifamilies.
Okay. So once they're built, once families go in, then they look at who's there, and then they figure out what it is.
I mean, as soon as they're built, occupancy isn't going to be part of the equation.
Okay, as soon as they're built. Okay, got it.
And we've done, well, the district, I'll give them credit, they've done a great job of
Yeah.
actually improving the quality of the water. So we've gone to utility committee a couple times and shown the aerial photos and the drone photos, and they've made substantial
I
improvements.
mean, this is by far, I think, the cleanest water in
Yeah.
Thurston County right now. So, yeah, they've done a really great job there.
Maybe I should go over to Long Lake.
Is there any other questions for this council? Well, I just like to thank the finance department for doing a great job with this, with this budget. And thanks for the good presentation, as always, Scott. Like I said at the beginning of this, you can tell a lot about your city based on its budget. And I think this is a budget that says that, Lacey is a premier service provider. And for the price, it's just absolutely amazing what we're able to provide to the citizens and businesses and visitors of Lacey for, a base flat rate of 67 cents per assessed thousand. That's just amazing. So good job.
That was a good cue. I was so excited to get to questions, but I did want to recognize the executive team for helping put the budget together. They're very thoughtful in terms of, I'll say, in terms of what they can ask and what we think we can afford. So I do appreciate that. Mr. Wu and I become best friends, at least for a week, if not 2 weeks, as we get through this presentation. Chrissy Wolf and Chelsea Yarwood should be also recognized in the finance department for putting all this stuff together. If I failed to talk about Donna Feliciano, because obviously this is not my work.
No,
I mean,
we all know it's Donna's work.
I would like to think that I kind of, interpret it, so I want to take some credit for it. I do want to point out, too, that a resident took a picture of this beautiful sunrise, and so Sonia Eckenroth took this and gave us permission to use the photo. So I think that's sort of apropos that we have a great future, and so the sunrise makes a lot of sense.
I was wondering where the Mariners reference was this time around.
There you go. A bright future.
Bright future. See us rise.
Rise, that's right.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that presentation. And let's go on to our next agenda item, which is boards, commissions, and committee reports. And I'm up first. So the Transportation Policy Board met on October 12th. We had a couple of key things on our agenda. The first thing that we were discussing is our Martin Way Corridor Study. This is a study that has been a joint planning between the Thurston Regional Planning Council, Thurston County, the City of Olympia, the City of Lacey, and Intercity Transit to really look at that Martin Way corridor through Lacey, Thurston County, Olympia, and try to come up with better ways we can plan and build around the major corridor that so many people use, but has had a difficult time of sort of redeveloping. And I think one of the things, big takeaways from this is because when I first came on council years ago, we did a corridors task study that did very similar to this report, and it recommended similar things that this report recommends. And I think that the problem when you see a corridor like Martin Way that goes through several different jurisdictions that have several different planning departments, and you're trying to come up with a way to transform the corridor, but the only way you can really transform that corridor is wait for the private sector to redevelop it one piece at a time, and that hasn't worked. I talked about that at the Transportation Policy Board. It's like, if we're waiting for the private sector to transform this corridor, we're going to be waiting for another 50 years. It's just not going to happen. And so I really hope that we can see public investment along that corridor, specifically when it comes to making sure we have sidewalks, street lighting, making that corridor the way it needs to be to attract the private sector to invest there. Not only that, but then let's look at, and they did a good job of saying what are some of the barriers to the redevelopment of that corridor. And anyone that knows or has looked at trying to develop along that corridor knows there's a lot of barriers there. So I think they did a really good job of this Martin Way corridor study. Now I think it's up to the public sector to step up and try to implement some of these strategies. And if we really want to see that corridor become the corridor we all hope it to be, because as a part of this, and I think I talked about this last time, is I did go out to the corridor and try to get on transit and see what it's like to go down that corridor if you didn't have your own private vehicle, and it's not easy. That Martin Way corridor is not pedestrian friendly, bicycle friendly, really at all. So anyway, I think it's a good document. I hope it just isn't put on a shelf like the last sort of really good document was, and I hope we can come together with those entities that participated in this Martin Way corridor study and actually see some change in the right direction and see that redeveloped the way we like it to be redeveloped. The other thing,
It's really just the three of us, isn't it?
well, it's really, it's Thurston County, Olympia, Lacey. Intercity Transit obviously has an important role through that corridor as well, and needs to be a partner to help weigh in on it, because they are the major transportation entity, obviously, that goes up and down that corridor. So, like I said, I think it's a pretty good document. Now, it's only as good as if you're going to do something with it. And I think what I've learned is that if you're going to sit and wait for the private sector to magically do it all for you, it's just never going to happen. So the next thing we talked about was our legislative priority issues. It's coming up already on a new legislative session, hard to believe. But we had a subcommittee got together and talked about what are the things that Thurston Regional Planning Council, specifically the Transportation Policy Board, is going to focus on with the state legislature. And of course, the big one we all know is the continued need for the I-5 design work, which is at $57.5 million just to complete that. And what's been really interesting is we know there are simple things that we can do to dramatically sort of improve that corridor, like the hard shoulder running, which you can do for pretty inexpensive. It's just trying to convince the state to fund those things, and it just seems like it keeps getting put off for farther and farther. So, but we're going to back trying to talk about that. We obviously know how important the Delta is and the need to finish that engineering and so on and so forth. The other thing that, of course, is a big new issues, which we all know, is the talk about a new commercial airport in central Thurston County. That's definitely something we're going to keep an eye on. There's a rural transportation package for projects in Bucota, Ground Mound, Rainier, Rochester, Tenino, and Yelm that we're going to talk about. Of course, broadband expansion. It's a big deal. The Nisqually Tribe has received a big grant that's going to be doing some real good work. We want to continue to work with them to make sure we can have broadband expansion. There's some clarifications about public meeting requirements for in-person. We're dealing with that too, is what are those requirements? It's sort of a little vague. We want to make sure we get some clarification there. And then there's some regional mobility grants that we're going to talk about as well. And so that really was, there was one other thing that we talked about, and this is really important I've been talking about for years now, that we're going to have a new call for project process that we're going to be implementing next month, actually, for the first time, about the federal funds that we receive for transportation projects in this region. And so we're under this new call for project process. The one thing that we realized is, as they're scoring these projects, what's what happens if the projects that we're scoring ends up in a tie? What do we do about that? And so we talked about a couple of different options about how you break those ties. And I think we have a good option of ranked choice voting, which is something that's been used very successfully. And but the one thing that we'll see as we're doing these new call for projects is that it's not a perfect system. You know, the first time out with these new rules, there's going to be sort of winners and losers, unfortunately, and we're going to have to adjust as we go through the process. And I just hope, you know, as the chair of the Transportation Policy Board, I've gone through several of these funding cycles, and you know, it's always kind of difficult because sometimes someone's project doesn't get picked and there's hard feelings. But the one thing I do like to say is that this region does an amazing job on the technical staff side of working together to support each other on our regional projects. We know these are finite amount of money that we receive from the federal government. We have to find a way we can best use those dollars for the benefit of Thurston County. And I think we do an amazing job in this county working together of trying to come up with those projects and supporting each other. And, you know, of course, our big project that we're going to continue to work on is our College Street project that, you know, has taken a long time, but we've are slowly moving in the right direction, and we'll see how that ranks next month. And so that is my report. Next up is the Deputy Mayor.
Okay, so the EDC, Thurston County Economic Development Council, had a 6-hour retreat yesterday, and out of that, we had a few good things come out of that. One of the main things was, you know, we talked about positions to add to the board. Where are we coming up short? Where are we missing? Do we have missing segments of population, people that are not represented on the board? And it was pretty unanimous that we would like to see some tribal representation on the board. And just a few more diverse backgrounds. One of the other board positions that we think is going to be needed or critical in the future is an infrastructure specialist. Is another person that we thought, you know, would be really helpful to the EDC board as we grow as a county. We're also going to need a recruitment specialist is another person that we thought would be a really good idea to have, because, you know, bringing new businesses to the area, you know, as the county grows. So here we are pushing over 300,000 people, heading towards 400,000, which in the next, I guess it's 10, 15 years at the very most. Are we looking to be at 400,000? We're gonna find that we have a lot of gaps to fill in terms of services and businesses. So bringing that recruitment person on board would be a person that we would like to see on the board. And then an emerging sectors person, so kind of a liaison. And, you know, at this point, you know, Lacey's really taken the lead on the emerging sectors of industry with the Lacey Makerspace, and we've really, you know, funded that project and pushed that thing ahead. But, you know, more of that is gonna need to happen in this county as we grow. So, you know, we are just one of the fastest growing counties in all of Washington. We had a small panel of students from SPSCC, and we asked them, you know, tell us your thoughts about, you know, living in Thurston County, working in Thurston County, and they gave us some interesting insight in terms of their view of you know, how they live and work here. One of the things that they said was they don't feel as strong a sense of community. Just to give you some background on the panelists, they are both transplants. They are both either military or raised in a military family. So that was one of the criteria of selection, was that, you know, we get people who maybe they didn't grow up here, maybe they haven't lived here for 20 years, but, you know, they have experienced what it is to live in Thurston County, and we wanted that feedback. So, you know, they said good things. They said, you know, indifferent things, and some things that they thought, you know, places that we could do better. And one of the places that they thought we could do better was, having some places to spend disposable dollars. So they suggested that they live in Thurston County, work in Thurston County, but have a hard time playing in Thurston County. And so I did remind them that, that we have an amazing park system, and they have used our parks, but find it difficult to use our parks in the rainy seasons of the year. So. A couple other things were, having a stronger sense of community, and so, and I'll get to all the projects that we'll be funding through LTAC, but I think the kind of consensus view was, we'd like to see Thurston County, I guess, have more activities, have more going on, and or promoting the activities more, just trying to bring the communities together, even more so than we already do. But they didn't live in Lacey, so they didn't know that, we do a lot of that here. And so I think that wraps up that report. Thurston Thrives actually met this morning, and Thurston Thrives has a new director. Josefina Magana led us this morning, and the direction that Thurston Thrives is taking is kind of dealing with our health crisis and trying to fill in health gaps in the community. Those include infant mortality rates, premature birth rates, student achievement gaps, and health gaps. So it's the new look of Thurston Thrives is one body of meetings for elected officials, the other one for coordinating councils, the other one is a funders committee, and then the other one is a data work group. So as elected officials, we will gather, be presented with the information from the data work groups, and decide what do we want to fund, and gather information from coordinating council as well. I think the ask that is going to come out of what we did this morning as we started transitioning and discussing how do we make a healthier community, how do we make a healthier place to live, we talked about, we actually had a couple representatives. One was from Capital Medical, and we had behavioral health specialists. And as the conversation turned to those types of health issues, we did get into the opioid crisis, and we talked about these opioid dollars that may be coming our way. And I think one of the asks is going to be, we should consider, pooling those dollars together to see if we can make a real effective, change in the community, or do something together with those dollars. So we may see something from them. There is an opioid task force here in Thurston County, and we may receive a request for funding, something like that. And then LTAC met on September 30th. You guys saw a good portion of what we did in this budget. And we did fund quite a few projects this year. We vetted out every single project and only found 2 that we couldn't fund. And so you will see a really robust group of events that is going to happen in 2023. There's going to be a whole lot of events happening. We tried to fund as many as we can, and part of the reason is because, as we've gone through 2 years of sitting still, it's time to get back out into the open and have community events, and hopefully we can make, get the community to come together and start having a good time with one another again. Again, we did have several brand new applicants, people who have never applied for LTAC funding before, so we were very excited to see that. One of them was actually a rugby organization who want to make Thurston County, the RAC, their home field. And so they, them and several others had, their very first time asking for LTAC dollars. And we also had the Fred Harris Lodge, who we wanted to thank for doing their event in Thurston County for the last 40 years without having submitted an LTAC ask. So we thank them, and they did come up with an ask this year, and we gladly funded that as well. And that is my report.
Great, thank you. I was just out at the RAC for that rugby team for their grand opening, And it's really cool because the rugby team actually bought the uprights. So they actually have official uprights for rugby. And it's, what I found out is it's the only field in all of Western Washington that is a actual field for rugby that is, and so with the uprights and not, PVC pipe trying to pretend to be uprights. And so he's the person who organized that is planning on having rugby tournaments come here, and as they actually asked for some more money to do some more lighting on and have some turf so they can play a little more year round. We're going to see a lot more rugby tournaments right here in our community. So it was really cool to go and talk to them and see a professional, and this is professional rugby. This isn't this isn't just a club sport. These are professional rugby teams. So it was really cool. With that, Councilmember Cox.
All righty. I'll start with the Thurston Climate Action Steering Committee. We appointed 2 more members to the new Citizen Advisory Group. One of them is our own Lindsay Fields, who was selected to represent the agricultural community on there. We also heard pretty fascinating presentations on the state organic waste program. And this is a ecology administered program whose mission is to reduce the amount of organic waste going to our landfills. And we also heard about Thurston County's solid waste reduction program. We also agreed that the steering committee should have fewer meetings during the year and allow the tech team that actually supports the steering committee to meet more frequently with the idea of trying to enhance the organization's productivity. It's been slow going so far, and so we're hoping this change might help. So we've canceled the October and December meetings, and we're going to evaluate to determine whether a meeting is needed in November. And I have proposed to the steering committee chair that Lacey staff give a presentation on our climate accomplishments and planned efforts, because I don't think other members really understand what we've accomplished so far. And I just think that story needs to be better told. So Rick and I are kind of working together to make that happen. The lot met on October 12th, and this was the most consequential lot meeting I've been to. There was a lot packed into it. We signed a rather innovative collective bargaining agreement that everybody seems to be pretty happy with, that's going to give employees a nice boost to try to help them weather the inflation for this contract. We had a public hearing on the proposed 2023-2024 budget and capital improvements plan. We approved 2023 and 2024 rates of 3% increase each year. We approved the actual budget and capital improvements plan. We had a presentation on the Deschutes Estuary Memorandum of Understanding, and this is among the different jurisdictions that are party to it. We had a presentation on master planning from our Assistant Executive Director, Matt Kennelly, who will actually take over as director in December. We had a basis of accounting report, so they're going to be changing the method of doing that to make it easier for the public to digest. So that wraps that up. And then Regional Housing Council, we heard about a proposal to put together a task force to help with these sweeps of homeless encampments, because there are public health concerns around them. So this task force then would be very similar to the structure of the hazardous weather task force, in that we would try to have better coordination to reduce harm to the people there with, deploying a team to try to get people, as many of them housed as we can, medical support if it's needed, connect with foundational case managers, and and the like. So this is something that we need to have a conversation about as a council to make sure that everybody can embrace this. And it will be on the agenda for this next week, this meeting on the 26th. We also got an update on the right-of-way homeless relocation project, and they're hoping that by next month we'll have the agreement in place to purchase a hotel for permanent supportive housing. And Olympia has been making some progress on site improvements on Franz Anderson Road. We also did a conversation about governance. There were questions about the community advisory groups, some of whose members may actually be homeless, whether we should offer a stipend to them. And then we also discussed housing action teams representatives, whether the two non-voting representatives who are going to be coming on to the Housing Council should also be the representatives for each of the two advisory committees. And then finally, we did check-ins on where each of the jurisdictions is with their ARPA funds. And we had a brief discussion ending with agreement that members and their tech teams need to confer with staff and boards before our December 26th meeting, which we've done in our work session and touched on a little bit tonight. And that's my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Greenstein.
Thank you. EMS Medic 1 met on the 19th, yesterday. A couple of things of interest. There's been some progress made in filling some of the vacant positions. We've had several issues with filling some of the management positions. Part of that being that the director, Kurt Harden, has been the temporary or interim public health officer for the county. He was supposed to be back at Medic 1 by now. He's not, because they've not filled that position. So we've been operating a bit shorthanded, but they are putting out an offer actually today to a new basic life support program manager, which will be a huge help to the team. We are a bit behind in public training for CPR. We've done 1,900 people have been trained so far this year. Last year at this time, we were at about 3,000, so we're quite a bit behind where we have been in past years. So we're looking for more people to take CPR training. And then we received an update on the transport pilot program that I've discussed a few times in the past. And we're 60 days into the 90-day pilot. It seems that it is working. The new process of having ambulances from the private ambulance companies not go out on the call when it's ring out for the paramedics or the fire departments to go out, but instead to call them once they're on site, has reduced the number of what they call dropped calls. In other words, calls where they couldn't get an ambulance because there wasn't one available. And it's also decreased the number of what's called no load. So where the ambulance shows up but doesn't actually transport anyone, which for a private company is problematic because they don't get paid if they're not transporting someone. So far, the preliminary numbers look really good for improving the system. We'll have a much better idea come early November when the project is complete and we have all the final numbers. But right now, it looks like it's going to be a major help to the system. And then the last thing is we approved a new medical program director contract, which will double the hours of service that we're getting from medical program director. It was 42 hours a month. It'll now be 84 hours a month. So we've actually brought on a second doctor to pick up that, to be a delegate for the MPD because it's just more hours than one person wants to put into the program because they actually work in the emergency room as well. And that is my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Stedman, are you there? Do you have a report?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Apologize for the background. Thurston County Law and Justice Council met today, actually, and it was a remote meeting, which hampered me from getting to this meeting. But it was a short meeting. We had election of officers. We elected John Thunheim as chair. And the other agenda item was, you heard the deputy mayor talk about Thurston Thrives and new executive director and that steamrolling again. We were visiting a strategic plan, a strategic model through Thurston Thrives a couple years ago before the pandemic started. And with the new executive director and COVID being less evasive and challenging, if you will, we're looking at restarting that up and to help us have a healthier community, especially when it comes to law and justice in our county. Other than that, we had last Wednesday, Community Action Council met, and it was the same time I was a cadet, if you will, in Lacey's Police Department Community Academy. Nothing out of the ordinary other than not renewing our contract with Thurston County. It's pretty much business as usual, just getting, aligning people with the needs and services in the community for those, most vulnerable. One other thing I wanted to mention was Gold Star Memorial. Construction phase 2, it was the second pour. We had a great turnout of volunteers, about 15 people came out. The challenge with construction sometimes is you don't know when concrete's coming, and they lost the pump truck, so they need a lot of volunteers to haul buckets to do the stem wall. And the community, being as caring as the Lacey community is in our region, they showed up and big support and we're willing to get sweaty and dirty for the project. So that was great. And then other than that, that's about it. I did want to mention my daughter's in college and she's in the sorority and they fundraising for Alzheimer's. And a little backstory for her is her grandfather is suffering late stages of that. And it's hard enough for a family to go through that, but the thing that helps is knowing that you can help other families not have to go through that. So, any funding, I would highly encourage people to go to Alzheimer's, a Walk for a Cure. There's a whole bunch of them, but any amount is a great amount, and we'll leave it at that. So that is the end of my report.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Kunkel.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have a couple today. Olympia Lacey VCB met on the 18th, and highlights of the meeting, looking at August scorecard for volatility. Occupancy fell below rates seen in the previous year, but the average daily rate is performing well. In marketing, we have a year-end goal for unique website visits for over 200,000, and our year-to-date for August is sitting at almost 188,000. Social media subscribers are also growing significantly, with the same with subscribers to our e-newsletter and visitor guides. There was also an interesting conversation with the director about Experience Olympia evolving from a destination marketing firm to a destination development management firm. Difference between the two is a bit more complex, but the intent is to do more than just focus on generating new visitation, but to add a more holistic approach to collaborate with community to overcome challenges which may be prohibiting repeat visitation and economic growth. I shared this in an article with the rest of the council, but as for now, it's still a conversation, but a very interesting one. Lacey South Sound Chamber, November 2nd is our next forum. we will be introducing the new chamber board, and our keynote speaker will be Representative J.T. Wilcox. And finally, I didn't want to take away Councilmember Stedman's thunder on the progress for the Gold Star Memorial Monument, but I will add a few things here. Most of the concrete foundation is now complete. We are slated to receive the monument at some point in December of this year, which is exciting news, long overdue. There is still work to be done, but our board is finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel on this, and our board is very thankful for all the supporters, all of the donations we have received to bring this monument to our community. We will have a gala to continue to raise funds and awareness for our Gold Star Memorial Monument on the 31st of March next year at the Lacey Community Center. And we tentatively have Lieutenant Governor Denny Heck as our keynote speaker. And tickets can be found on Facebook events for Gold Star Memorial Foundation Dinner and Gala. And that is my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Vasquez.
All right, I've got a couple of reports. So first off, Intercity Transit was yesterday evening, and we had a presentation on the Village Vans program, which is a really fantastic set of programs. There's actually two different programs that they run. One is employment-related transportation, which is free. So folks that may face transportation issues, they don't have a car, and taking the bus might take them a really long time. But in order to get to work or to get to childcare and then get to work, they need to be able to get there quickly. The Village Van will give them a direct ride, and it's a free service that IT provides. They also have a Village Van's driver training and job skills program. So if people are looking for a job, Intercity Transit needs drivers, and the Village Van program has been sort of a connection point where they take folks that are looking to get training, who want to volunteer, who may want to transition into being one of the Village Van drivers, and give them that job training so that they can be a Village Van driver and then maybe eventually become one of the bus drivers in the community. So really, really neat program that I didn't know much about until we had the presentation yesterday. A couple of other updates from Intercity Transit. We're trying to fill some vacancies on the Community Advisory Committee for IT. So there were 10 applicants for 5 vacancies, which is pretty good for Community Volunteer Board. And they're going to be interviewing all 10 of those candidates. They all look like they were very solid. They're also doing some exploration on zero emissions. Like we're hiring a contractor to do an analysis on zero emissions options for future buses. And there was some recognition that staff had put a lot of work and energy into that. Also, the mayor had mentioned, some of the, like the Regional Mobility Grant Program and the Green Transportation Grant Program. Intercity Transit is submitting for those opportunities to support future zero emissions work for Intercity Transit. And then they've been building that new Pattison facility for a really long time, but it's almost done. They keep talking about how long it's been in the works, right? But they're going to be having a grand opening celebration on November 10th from 2 to 4. So if y'all want to see the inside of that building, I had an opportunity to take a tour, and it's beautiful on the inside, but keep that on your calendar. We had a Board of Health meeting on October 11th, and it was the first time that we had almost all of the board members, so we're still waiting on the appointment of the tribal representative, but we had 6 of us there, and we met the new board members. We had a presentation from Kurt Harden, who we're borrowing from EMS so that he can help Board of Health stand up about what public health is and what it's not, right? Services that public health provides, things that are at the population level, like making sure that our water is clean and reducing transmission of disease in communities. It's not individual receipt of medical care, but it's things that make our whole population healthier. So kind of that level setting for what the Board of Health is for. We also had nominations of Board of Health officers. Since our board has expanded, we need to figure out who's going to be chairing the meetings. Ty Menser was the only person nominated for chair, but there were 2 nominees for vice chair. It was myself and one of the new members, Maria Williams. So we'll figure out who's going to be the vice chair at the next meeting. We figured out meeting cadence, and we also had a very brief conversation on identifying strategic priorities for the board, since we're figuring out how to be a board, since everybody's new, and how we're going to make recommendations to the county commissioners on funding. Because the Board of Health has a budget, assigned to it, but the commissioners are the ones that allocate the funds. We'll just make recommendations based on what we identify as priorities. We had a TRPC meeting. It was a lot of what the mayor covered also from the Transportation Policy Board, so updates on the legislative goals for next year, regional mobility grants, and we got a briefing on the airport stuff from Mark Daly, but actually the report we got here in the Lacey City Council last week was much more comprehensive, so nothing new there. And Orca, we canceled the Orca board meeting for this month, but we have two conversations, or at least I have two conversations scheduled next week, two subcommittees, one on the salary survey they're doing for the Orca staff. I'm going to be helping with that. And then an update on regulations related to recreational burning, which I mentioned to the council previously. That's a continuing, ongoing discussion on whether or not we're going to update the rules on recreational burning in Lacey and Tumwater and Olympia. That's my report.
Okay, well, with that, we've reached the end of our agenda. I do just want a couple things. The Lacey Community Foundation, which I'm not directly a part of, but I'm intimately aware with, did receive their 501c3 status. So that's a big deal for the foundation, and that they're progressing very nicely with that. They're going to have a new board meeting come up and hopefully take the next steps and hire an executive director and go on with that work. And I also wanted to make comment, boy, the air quality the past couple of days have just been absolutely horrible. I mean, it was so bad out there the past couple of days, and so
They canceled recess in the elementary schools.
Yeah.
They didn't let kids outside.
Well, and I had to personally send all my employees home because I didn't want them outside in the air either. But usually I don't wish for rain, but in this case, it's really great that the rain's here. We had a good run of it with the sun in the summer, but now it's time for the rain to come. Hopefully put out the fires and clean up our air quality. And so with that, I mean, it's really good that it's here. And I also want to do another quick shout out to the city manager, to Troy, and to, of course, all the staff who put together this amazing budget. I just realized this is my 13th budget presentation, which is hard to believe. And I'm just really proud of being able to represent the people of Lacey and the values that we have here and the value that we give for our services. So good job, great job. And with that, like I said, we reached the end of our agenda. So without objection, I'll call this meeting adjourned. And as always, you keep it classy, Lacey.